So my name is James Reardon. I work at Kurt Salmon. We're a consulting firm and we specialize in retail and consumer products. For the past few years I've specialized in supply chain operations and omni-channel strategy, and I've done a lot of work with LLamasoft and supply chain design.
Hi, I'm Mark Zahuranec. I'm an industrial engineer with DSW. If you didn't know, DSW specializes in footwear, but we also sell accessories, handbags, hosiery. DSW services currently 435 stores throughout the United States, with plans to probably double that over the next 10 years. My roles and responsibilities, I'm technically our labor management guy, but as our company grows, our needs grows, I've adapted to basically whatever we needed to do, including working with James. So one of the first things we realized is the whole idea of servicing our customers in an omni world was no longer an option for us. We had to do it. Once we made that decision, we had to really define, well, what does omni mean to us? We threw out things like, well, we want same-day service, same-hour service. What is Amazon doing today? But we really had to take a look at, is that even beneficial to our customers? Is that going to drive sales or margin? What we ended up concluding is that really we had to service our nationwide customer base in 2 days for any online orders. On top of that, our Western stores were being serviced from a replenishment standpoint at a much slower rate. I'm talking 2 weeks versus 2 days for our Eastern stores. So we really needed to bring that down, so we provided that consistent service across the network. On top of that, when we looked at our long-range growth plans, we realized our single campus in Columbus was going to have a huge capacity issue. So there's going to be a large CapEx investment on the network without actually solving any of these service issues that we face today. And that's why we really needed to drive and partner up with someone to look at what can our network do for us.
So DSW was a great case in terms of omni-channel pushing the need to change supply chain design. And a big component of that is what we've coined the term need for speed. In terms, e-commerce customers are now expecting 2-day service, and that was especially applicable for DSW. So we had to figure out, how do we service the customers, and that becomes the most important priority for a supply chain. It's no longer about just minimizing cost. It's how do we maximize service and promise that the promises we've made to our omni-channel customer. Supply chain's now taking a new role in terms of fulfilling that customer's needs and fulfilling their wants. And it's now the supply chain that's really the key provider of whether or not that customer ends up being satisfied or unhappy with their purchase. If you can't get it to them at the time they want, at the cost they want, then that customer's not going to be satisfied in the end.
We've actually done network analysis before at DSW, with the goal always is to reduce costs. Traditionally, distribution in our company is looked at kind of a necessary evil. What can you do? We don't care what you do, just get it to us cheap as you can, and we'll take it from there. So what we really had to focus on is then, if we were going to raise the cost of our network, what was really the benefits? So we really drove home what faster replenishment time would do for us from a benefit, from a sales, from a margin standpoint. We also looked at online, how would providing that consistent customer service drive customer retention, make DSW top of mind for everyone in the country, not just people on the eastern half of the United States, but all over the place. We wanted to make sure that benefit analysis and sales were included on the overall cost and the overall percent of what the network was going to actually cost as a percentage of the total business.
What made this project really interesting was the fact that it wasn't isolated to the traditional supply chain measures. Like Mark said, we looked at what was the impact of sales and margin of the business, and it really connected the supply chain group within DSW to the broader business. It made the supply chain team connect better with the rest of the business in terms of how does the supply chain service the merchandising team and the sourcing team in the stores. And we figured out a couple of key impacts on our in-stock position, both in-store and online. and really showed that the in-stock, especially in the store, was driving an incremental sale. You have to determine whether or not omni-channel is really worth the cost, and we're saying that if we didn't have the product in stock in the store, there's a lost sale associated with that. So we were able to show how a reduction in service time to the store would lead to increase in sales plus increase in margin. And there are other benefits too, including the assortment that was able to be offered in the store. And all this really led to an increase in customer retention and providing consistent customer service across the whole country.
So for us, we compete against Macy's, Nordstrom's. They obviously have a huge network already in place. I mean, they don't just sell shoes. They sell all types of products that they can leverage that network and system to already provide that service for their customers. But it doesn't change the fact they're our competitors. We need to find a way to get out there, and the first step is looking at a regional network distribution and doing the analysis to see what does it really mean to us to provide the service that we're talking about.
So it's really important for companies today to understand, two components. First, what is your customer expecting from you? And it's changing, and the customer expectations are higher. But second, what are your competitors doing? And also, what's realistic? Everyone wants to look at the giants of Amazon and all the new companies out there that are providing, same day or next day service. And that might be realistic for some products and some services, but not everybody needs to purchase something and get it shipped to them in 2 days. And not every company is offering that. That's the dream and that's the future. But you need to think about what's realistic for now. What are your competitors offering? What are your customers demanding and requesting? And that's what you need to target. You don't need to shoot for the top. You need to shoot for what's expected. Establishing omnichannel is a disruptive event across the overall company organization. It's changing a mindset between having, a retail business and an e-commerce business and bringing those together to say it's really it's one customer and it needs to be one business. Omnichannel needs to be a seamless interaction between that company and that customer. In order to establish that, there are 3 key building blocks that need to move first. It's the organization structure within the company, then your supply chain, and your IT systems. So all of those 3 combined are what needs to support every other omnichannel initiative, and changing your org structure, supply chain, and IT are all significant initiatives that are going to take, they're going to take a long time to actually implement and change.
So at DSW specifically, even within the last 2 or 3 years, we had different initiatives across all our different departments. IT had their own goals. Store ops had their own way and view of the world. Distribution, transportation obviously had their own goals to reduce costs. Each one of these groups were highly successful, but they were disjointed, they were unaligned. So we had to solve that problem. We had to bring everyone together to focus on there is a plan and we all need to drive towards that plan. So we actually reorged the complete structure of the company by creating what we call our innovations team. They're now called that. They were actually originally called our Omni team. We plucked key members out of all the departments and brought them together under us, what we call our CIO, which is our Chief Innovations Officer, to drive that group and drive the entire direction of the company. The goal was to have no more Omni projects. Omni was just the way of the world, and that's how we were going to operate from now on.
Though omnichannel it's real, and we're taking the initial steps forward, but it's a long and hard road to reach, omnichannel and reach a profitability state. So there's a couple key parts, and that's first, really, customer engagement is the most important priority of omnichannel. It's why it exists, and you really have to define that strategy, understand what that customer is expecting from you, and make sure that you're meeting that customer or even exceeding that customer's expectations. So understanding your engagement model. But then the next couple from a supply chain standpoint are really managing your cost to serve, and it's going to get more complex as we start to get further down this world of omni-channel and expecting more parcel delivery. So understanding how your overall supply chain costs are going to increase, and that's a new reality, but how are you wisely spending your money to reach that customer service? Another key thing that is really important going forward is your inventory placement. Definitely something that we see as the next evolution of the omni-channel question is, what is your strategy and how are you positioning your inventory, in a way that can service your customers? And it's a very multifaceted question, and it's extremely challenging, but it's definitely the next wave of what needs to be answered. You can have a supply chain network and you can have the physical assets, but how you plan your inventory in your distribution centers and in your stores. And then the final point of achieving profitability is really looking at your customers and how do you achieve a profitable customer. Not necessarily focusing on each individual transaction, but how do you establish that long-term customer relationship that ends up driving profitability over time?
For us, beyond driving sales and the top line, there was other things we wanted to look at, maybe more soft benefits. The whole idea if we have a regional distribution facility, it would service both channels. We need to create a channel agnostic inventory. We need to accomplish that by not actually, creating more carrying costs of goods.
We brought on, started the project, DSW asked us, as Kurt Salmon, to come in and help them with their long-term supply chain design strategy. We've been using LLamasoft for many of our past engagements, and Kurt Salmon decided to really have a strategic partnership with LLamasoft for the past several years. So for DSW, we leveraged a lot of the network optimization tool, building up their baseline network, and we tested several different design scenarios in the future, from regional networks to even more like localized store, ship from store, or metro hub type concepts. So we tested some unique strategies. The biggest input to this is we started off with a visioning session. We not only worked with a supply chain group, but Mark and we sat down with representatives from the entire business and really wanted to hear what their expectations and requirements were from all the business leaders of what role supply chain had to play. And that fed into how we did our modeling. One last thing that kind of made this project unique in terms of thinking about those top line benefits, we had to take a step back and we did some customer surveys, and we looked at we worked with the inventory and analytics team at DSW to understand how was the supply chain impact that we could take from the LLamasoft model, and does that translate into that sales and margin?
So one of the things I actually feel pretty bad for poor James, when he walked into the door the first day, is we didn't know what we wanted. We didn't know, was it 7 distribution centers? Was there regional distribution centers that only service a certain number of our SKUs? Do we build bigger stores with bigger back rooms to act as mini distribution centers? We really relied on them to guide us. What's realistic? What's cost effective? And I'm sure he had to model a million different scenarios to kind of focus and narrow our attention to, here's really the direction you want to go. Now pick the top 3, and we're going to spend the most money and effort and time to really, really understand what that means for us. Mm-hmm. So they were a great partner in helping that aspect of kind of taking all the what ifs and crazy scenarios that were getting thrown at them and bringing it all together. So for us, at least 2 big ones right now that are on the top of our mind is, how do we, with a regional network distribution, how do we split our POs? Is it a combined PO? How do we shift inventory? Where's the right inventory placement, as James alluded to also? And then also having that inventory available to both channels, creating a channel agnostic warehouse where you can reduce having extra inventory for one channel, not enough in the other, having the buyers being able to collaborate with one vendor to buy for both channels. So that's one of the big things that we need to really focus on in the future.
A big challenge in the industry going forward is, working in retail, it's very, very dynamic, and it's changing every day, and omni-channel is getting more complex. So you establish, a supply chain design, and you establish your network, and it requires significant infrastructure, and it's a huge change to build facilities. But the real challenge in the future is going to be, how do you have a dynamic and a flexible supply chain that can meet your needs on a fly? And that gets down to the next level of, inventory placement is going to be significant. Do you keep it in the stores? It is in the DCs? What's your product flow model? How are you getting product from the vendor to your customer in hand? And it's having a flexible supply chain that's also cost effective. That's going to be the challenge in the future. We have a lot more data that we're going to be able to analyze, but it's how do we use that to make useful decisions at a strategic level and also a tactical level.